If you could start off by telling us a little bit about your show this year at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival.
So the show is basically based upon me coming to Australia and, I've got kids here now and how I'm raising them, comparing that to how I was raised, the difference in culture, from where I'm from, which is Kenya, and how it is in Australia, and how after living here for so long, I feel like I'm starting to do things or say things that a normal Australian would do. So, and that kind of it catches me off by surprise, and hence the show Australianised, because I don't know if I'm already Australian or Australia is getting into me in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Vincent, tell us a little bit about your career as a comedian. Were you already active in comedy in Kenya, or was that something that happened once you came to Australia?
It happened when I got to Australia. So it was one of those things like I didn't plan to get into. I used to watch a lot of Australian comedy when I first got to Australia, and I didn't get to understand it. So for the most bit, I thought it was really boring. And I was like, I'm probably funnier than that. And that's how I got into comedy. So out of sheer arrogance and, what's the word? Was basically sheer arrogance and not understanding Australian culture, basically.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it. And I saw the same comedians like years later after living in Australia and understanding Australian humor and culture, and they were the most hilarious guys I've ever seen. So I guess it made me realize that humor is very geographical, depending on where you come from and stuff like that. Initially, you might not understand someone's culture or someone's sense of humor, but once you start knowing the little things about them and their quirks, then you find humor in everything.
Yeah. How unique is Australian comedy? Because I know the great Australian film, The Castle, it was a hit here. They took it to America and it flopped so badly because nobody got jokes about, hey, it's Saturday. They didn't know what a Commodore car was. How unique is that Australian humour?
I think it's very different because I grew up with American comedy and British comedy, and I think especially in those areas, because you have people who look like you doing comedy. So, you have the late Bunny Mark, you have Steve Harvey, you had people like Richard Pryor, you had your Lenny Henry in the UK, where black culture and white cultures is talked about, and you kind of get it because when they talk about black culture, I've got it. And you're like, oh, cool, I get that, and that's funny because it's happening to me, even if they're, in other areas of the world. So coming to Australia and not finding that there's many black people in general and not many black people in that industry, was just very different to that. And even then, after getting to comedy, I want to say there might have been maybe other Africans who did comedy before me. I don't know because I never met any. So when I started, I think I was the only one doing comedy as an African person. I wouldn't say black person. I would say as an African person in Australia. So I could say I started African comedy in Australia.
Yeah.
Not trying to be proud or anything, but by then I didn't even have people to go to and say, is this joke funny or will people understand it? Because I was the only one doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, your journey into comedy, how did you start out? Did you start going to like open mic nights, smaller comedy shows? How did you actually start out in the Australian comedy scene?
Yeah, I started out doing that, going out to open mics, met a few other new comedians in other rooms like the Comics Lounge, and back then they used to have workshops for new comedians. So I started doing that, started doing, the smaller rooms and getting myself to meet other comedians and act with other comedians. I got myself in a comedy competition, probably 3 weeks. Once I started comedy, and it was in Sydney, so I went and did that, which was very risky, but somehow I came second in that, and I think that boosted my confidence into, I can do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, then it's just a normal journey like every comedian goes through. You go out, you do gigs, you try jokes. If they work out, then, that's good. If they don't work out, you just go back into the drawing board. Sometimes you get comedians who would come up and give you another perspective that you might not have considered. So, yeah, it's been, a collaborative journey all through. I've met people in the comedy industry who've assisted me and helped me to, sometimes work on certain areas of my comedy life. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how tough has the last 12 months been for you? Because I know that the whole comedy festival was shut down last year, and it's been very, very difficult for comedians to get out there and make a living. How difficult has that last 12 months been for you?
It was really tough because I didn't actually even go out and do any gigs in those 12 months. It was tough even from a creative point of view because we were in lockdown. You had that 5K, you couldn't go anywhere. So, and comedy happens out there when you're out and about and things happen or you meet people and stuff like that. So it was really tough making money. It was really tough not being able to perform, not being able to be creative. So, just trying to sometimes put yourself in the zone and think about ideas that I had before or new ideas and try and put them down and see where you can fit them in a show because you don't even know how life is going to be going. So it was pretty tough in that regard, but I feel, as much as comedians might have had it harder, other people might have the same. So it's just trying to be mentally strong and prepare for this year, hoping that this year the comedy festival was going to go on, which I feel very lucky that we're in it and doing it and receiving good reviews, so can't complain at this time.
Definitely. I was going to ask that. How do you feel now that you're back on stage? Was there a few nerves on the first few nights when you were back out there doing comedy again?
Yeah, definitely. It's like a muscle, right? So if you don't use it, you lose it. And not having used it in 12 months, you come back on stage and wonder if you're still going to be able to make people laugh. You don't want to you still use some of the old material that worked, but at the same time, you are taking that risk of, I'm going to try this new one that I thought about during lockdown and see if it works. So definitely now it's all through, definitely.
Awesome. And for all our listeners out there, if you want to go and check out Vincent's show, Australianised, check our website for all of the details on how to get tickets. There's a link there. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, then just check right below where you found the podcast and there'll be a link there for where you can go and get tickets. To finish up, Vincent, what would you like to say to our listeners out there who are thinking about coming along and seeing your amazing show?
It's been a good show. First 2 weeks we've had sellout shows, good audience reviews in terms of they come out and they're enjoying it. So if you want to learn a little bit about other cultures, well, it's not going to be other cultures. It's either going to be a Kenyan culture versus Australian culture, and have a little bit of insight into the other side of life. You should come to my show. I think it's a good show. I really love it. The audience love it, and I think it speaks for itself. The first time we sold out, and then the other times we've been selling out tickets. So come out, come have fun. I promise you, you will enjoy it. I promise you that.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight, Vincent. I'll be seeing your show this week, so thank you so much for that, and have a great festival.
Thank you very much, David, and I look forward to seeing you at the show.
Definitely, mate. All right, I'll let you go. Have a great night, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
All right. See you, mate. Bye.
Bye.